Hello and welcome. My name is Quincy Lissauer. I am the Executive Director of ssafe, and in partnership with Professor John Spink from Michigan State University, we have developed a live demo of the ssafe food fraud vulnerability assessment tool. What we're going to do over the next 20 minutes is take you step by step through the Excel version of the ssafe tool. So after downloading the ssafe tool from our website, and opening it up in Excel, you're going to see a number of tabs at the bottom of your screen. You're going to have a decision tree, information and scoping sheet, the questionnaire, main spider webs and certainty, series of detailed spider webs, the output sheet, and the final report. I'm going to take you through each one of these step by step, and John will fill in some additional information as and when we go along. So as you open up the tool, the first place to start is the decision tree. And the reason why we developed this particular decision tree was because a lot of companies were asking us, well, where do I start with applying the actual tool? And as a result, we've asked about 5 or 6 very simple questions, as you can see, to help you figure out where to target the actual tool. Therefore, for example, the one where we start in terms of the question is, have past food fraud incidences occurred within your company? If yes, you should undertake the assessment on all areas of the operation where fraud has occurred in the past. And the reason for that, John, can you explain that a little bit to us, why it is important for companies to undertake a fraud assessment first in areas where fraud has occurred in the past?
A key, whenever we're looking at assessments, or vulnerabilities, there's a hierarchy. And the most important, most urgent, most clear problems are those incidents that have actually occurred for your company. And in that case, you'll have a lot more clarity on exactly what happened, the actual costs, and really a lot of focus on the supply chain itself. Also, these are important to point out early because these are things that your company has already been made aware of. So these aren't distant risks or vulnerabilities. These are ones that have happened to you.
Thanks, John. And as we then go through this, if the answer to that is no, you go to the next question. Does the company have a general vulnerability to fraud? If yes, carry it out on those parts where those general vulnerabilities occur. If no, you move on and go, does the company have a weak ethical culture? If yes, carry out the assessment on a part where the company has a weak ethical culture or is perceived to be weak, et cetera, et cetera. So you keep going through this all the way down till the end and if you've answered no to all of these and you get to the last question, is your company certified to a GFSI recognized scheme? If so, then you must complete as a minimum an assessment on a company-wide basis. And that will help you meet the new requirements from GFSI to conduct a vulnerability assessment and prepare a mitigation plan. Once you've then determined where to actually apply the tool, you then go to the next sheet, and that is the information scoping sheet. Here you basically just put in the general information around what the name of the company is, the business unit, the location, the date where the assessment occurs, the people that are actually included in the actual assessment. Here you determine whether it is done on an ingredient basis, a product basis, a brand basis, or the company as a whole. You then justify why it is that you have chosen this part of the business to actually focus on to conduct the food fraud vulnerability assessment. Identify any suppliers and any customers that have been engaged during the actual assessment, which part of the supply chain it's in, and which geography or country it has been applied to. Now, all of these answers will ultimately then populate in your final report, which is the very last tab, which we'll come to later. Once you've filled in the information sheet, you can move on to the questionnaire. Now, the tool has a total of 50 questions separated into 3 different areas. The first area, which is questions numbers 1 through 11, help you identify whether there is an opportunity for somebody to commit fraud to your organization. Subsequently, questions 12 to 31 are all around whether somebody is motivated enough to commit fraud against your organization. And finally, questions 32 through 50 are around the controls that you already have in place or may need to put in place as your organization to help prevent fraud from actually occurring. John, this approach around motivation, opportunities, and controls, would you like to say a couple of words around why it is important to take this kind of approach?
Yes, thank you, Quincy. A real key is that when we consider the root cause, this is a human adversary. So the biological organism in question is not a microbe, it's not E. coli, it's a human. So we do need to shift our focus when we're trying to understand the root cause and we're trying to understand the motivation so we can break that cycle. We need to understand criminology. Specifically, situational crime prevention is the study of the space of crime or the factors that lead to a fraud opportunity, crime opportunity. So this has been incorporated into this set of questions to look at that vulnerability and consider it from the bad guy's perspective and really to think like a criminal. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So at the top here, you will see we ask the question. We give you a reason as to why the question is actually being asked. You then have 3 different options to answer the question. We provide some useful information sources to help you answer the question. We recommend who should be involved in answering it. And then from here, you input your answer, the certainty you have as to how certain you are that that your answer is correct, the name of the person or the expert who is answering the question, and a justification for your selection. So let's take the very first question. The first question is it simple or complex to adulterate your raw materials? The reason why we ask that question is because easy adulteration of the composition of raw materials provides opportunities for potential offenders to commit fraud. So let's look at the 3 different options. The composition of materials cannot be modified and products can only be replaced. Option 2 is composition of raw materials can be modified by mixing with low quality product, own material or foreign material, such as ground products like powders or ground beef. Option 3 is the composition of raw materials can be modified easily by mixing low quality or foreign materials and by altering valuable food components. Between those 3 different options, you can help find information sources such as Food Shield, foodfruit.org, and some European Commission sources to help you determine whether or not it's easy or not to adulterate the actual raw materials. We recommend that somebody from your quality assurance team and your lab are involved in answering the question. Now, I have pre-selected already a whole series of answers throughout this spreadsheet. Here we have just selected answer number 1. So basically, the composition of materials cannot be modified. We are very certain of our answer. John Spink was the expert who answered the question. And our justification is that the composition of the product materials is virtually impossible to adulterate. Let's then go to another question around the motivation for somebody to commit fraud. So question number 16 says, how would you describe the ethical business culture in your company? The reason why that question is asked is because poor ethical business cultures can motivate employees to commit fraud. You then again have three options. Option number one, there's a lot of mutual trust. We have a lot of standards, codes, and requirements that are taken seriously by our employees. We discuss regularly unethical conduct and moral issues across the organization. We have reporting on unethical conduct, and ethical conduct is highly valued and rewarded by senior management, is option one. The second option, which is kind of in between, is there is mutual trust, but not across the entire company. Not all employees take standards and codes seriously. We discuss unethical conduct, but it is limited to major incidents only. We report on unethical conduct, and ethical conduct is not equally valued nor rewarded by senior management. And then option three, obviously, is the highest risk area. There's a lack of mutual trust. Standards aren't taken seriously. There's no discussion of unethical conduct. There's no reporting, and ethical conduct is not valued by senior management. We recommend that management is the one that answers the actual question. In this particular case, we put a 3 here, and we are very certain of our answer. Obviously, we could say that John and Quincy answered the question, and then we would need to justify our answer. Then let's look at one example for controls. Number 40, is there a whistleblowing system in place for your company? The reason why is the academics from Wageningen University in their research have determined that well-designed and implemented whistleblowing systems enhance the discovery of fraudulent activity within an organization. So going into the answers, again, 3 options. Option number 1 is no whistleblowing system exists. Option 2 is there is a whistleblowing system that is available, but there's no clear protection system for the whistleblower in place, and reporting of fraudulent activity goes to the direct supervisor, not an independent officer. The third option is there's a whistleblowing system in place that is well established and well known across all personnel. Fraudulent practices can be reported to an independent officer, and anonymity of the whistleblower is strictly protected. So again, there you go, answers 1, 2, or 3. You can determine that by identifying whether or not the policy document is available in the company and the procedure for fraudulent reporting. Human resources should probably be the one answering this question. And here again, we put a 2. There is a whistleblowing system available, but there's no direct protection for the whistleblower. And we're quite certain of our answer. Now, one thing you need to note here, as you go from the opportunities and motivation questions, so questions number 1 through 31, the option number 1 is low risk, option 2 is medium risk, and option 3 is high risk. When you get to questions 32 to 50 for the controls, option 1 is high risk, option 2 is medium risk, and option 3 is low risk. And the reason for that is because of the way that subsequently the spider webs are actually developed. So let's go and have a look at the spider webs. We have answered all 50 questions and the certainty around them. And these have just been done randomly. This is not based on a real case scenario. And what you will see here is that it spits out 3 key spider webs around opportunities, motivations, and controls. In areas where there are high spikes, i.e. very red high spikes, you know that those are areas that are of high risk and are areas where you're going to have to focus on in terms of determining your mitigation effort. And in areas where there's low, so here around 1, those areas, you know that you've got relatively low risk based on the answers that you gave, and therefore don't necessarily need to focus too much effort in terms of mitigation techniques. The same goes around motivations, and on controls, it's the exact opposite. In those areas where you've got high spikes of green, those are areas where you know you've got a lot of controls in place to protect your business. Whereas those areas that don't have high spikes, those are probably areas where you want to focus on putting in additional controls within your business to protect yourself from fraudulent activity. John, have you got any thoughts that you would like to share at this stage around the spider webs?
Yes, thank you, Quincy. A key is when we're thinking about food fraud prevention and the entire system, the process and the cycle, is the first half is conducting these vulnerability assessments. And the second is implementing those prevention strategies. So the tool, when it shows these results in these spider diagrams here, what this does is help you to prioritize and identify where you have the most highest concern. So if you look on the opportunities chart there for 11, 10, 9, and 8, those are four that are the big concern. Now, what we do is for those high ones, you'd also then look at motivations for the ones that are especially high, that we then try to look at and use this to then look at more of a mitigation plan or control plan. So this feeds us information. It doesn't tell us what to do. It doesn't tell you if you have to do anything, but it really informs our decision making as we move on to the next.
Thanks a lot, John. And I think you really make a very strong point there. This doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you the areas where the highest risks are, where you may want to undertake certain mitigation techniques. And the reason for that is, as ssafe developing this tool, we do not know the specifics of what is happening within your business. So it is impossible for us to give specific mitigation advice or techniques to help you address any of these areas of high risk. That ultimately you're going to have to do yourself based on the areas that you've identified where there is a lot of risk and the specific situations and nature of the business that you are actually in. Now, this shows only the opportunities, motivations, and controls separately. What we then also developed is a series of detailed spider webs. And what that does is it helps overlay those areas of where there may be risk in terms of opportunities and motivations with controls that you have in place. Because you may have areas where there are opportunities and motivations for people to commit fraud, but you may also already have hard controls in place. So this detailed spiderweb sheet helps you overlay some of those controls against motivations. So if we look here in terms of motivations in your own business, we can see that there are some high areas of risk around economic conditions of your own company, organizational strategy of your company, and ethical business culture. But at the same time, in terms of controls, you do integrity screening of your own employees, and you do have an ethical code of conduct for your company. So although the risk is quite high, you already have specific controls in place. So these two then offset each other. And you may then determine as a business to say, well, actually, yes, we recognize that the risk is high. We already have certain controls in place. We may want to add additional controls. However, you may also determine that you're already satisfied with the controls that you have in place within your business. The same then goes for some of the other areas where we look at motivations of direct suppliers with controls that you have over suppliers. So here, the economic conditions of your suppliers is weak. That creates risk. The organizational strategy for managing your suppliers is relatively weak, and the business culture of your suppliers is weak. On the other hand, you've looked at your controls and you say, well, we have some controls that we already have put in place, and they're relatively strong. But this may indicate to you that we may want to do some work on controls that we have in place for our direct suppliers and improve those going forward. And that is really how all of these detailed spider webs that we have within the spreadsheet work, and it just helps you more rapidly, visually interpret quickly how you as a business can act on the answers that you've given in the original questionnaire in spreadsheet number 3. John, from your experience, have you found these to be particularly helpful?
Thank you, Quincy. A real key is that this provides a structured assessment. It provides a way to look at the questions, way to think about them, and then it gives this estimate and these overviews of some of the output. And so this is the real key to just getting started. And so when we look at this, it's started to give you just more structure in how you go about thinking about the root causes, and then gives you some starting points when you start to look at those mitigation plans or prevention strategies. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So after all this, and having done the interpretations, you then get to the output sheets. And really, this is a relatively simple component. In here, manually, you can put in whether you believe that the risk, based on the assessment you've done so far, for opportunities is low or high, whether the motivations in your company is low or high, motivations of direct supply is low or high, and motivations across the industry are low or high. Again, you put this in manually. And the same goes for your control measures in terms of the adequacy. Is it adequate enough or not? In here, you then manually put in what your conclusions are from your actual assessment. And based on those conclusions, what mitigation techniques you are actually proposing for your business to actually adopt. Once you've put all that information here into the output sheet, you go to the report. You put the name of the company. The name of the company is already filled in automatically here from the original information scoping sheet. So then the date is automatically populated here, and you just click on Create Report and click Yes, and it'll ultimately then provide you with a PDF report with all the conclusions from this particular assessment that you can then print off and include into your overall food safety management system reporting. That is a quick summary of how the tool works. We'd be more than happy to provide any additional information going forward if you have any further questions. Our contact details can be found on the MSU website and on the ssafe website. We would like to thank you for following this particular tutorial, and we hope it was helpful. John, I would like to thank you very much for your additional insights during the provision of this particular tutorial, and we look forward to hearing from anyone who has any particular comments or questions going forward. Thank you very much.